The conference room felt suffocating, despite its floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Marcus Hayes sat at the mahogany table, his lawyer shuffling papers beside him, while they waited for Victoria to arrive. After 18 months of separation and countless rescheduled meetings, today was supposed to be simple: sign the papers, divide their assets, and officially end what had once been 8 years of marriage. When the door opened, Marcus looked up with the practiced indifference he'd spent months perfecting. But the moment Victoria stepped through that doorway, every carefully constructed wall he'd built came crashing down. His breath caught in his throat. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Time seemed to fracture and slow, because there she stood, his almost ex-wife, unmistakably, undeniably 7 months pregnant. The room tilted. Marcus heard his lawyer say something, but the words were underwater sounds, muffled and distant. Victoria moved slowly, gracefully despite her obvious condition, her hand instinctively resting on the curve of her belly in that universal gesture of expectant mothers. She looked radiant in a way he'd never seen before. Her dark hair longer now, her face carrying a peaceful glow that seemed entirely at odds with the formality of the moment. "Hello, Marcus," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor he could detect beneath it. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. His mind raced through calculations, dates, possibilities. They'd been separated for 18 months. 18 months. The baby couldn't be his. It wasn't possible. Yet seeing her like this, seeing the physical evidence that she'd moved on, that another man had given her what Marcus had always refused to discuss, felt like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it stopped beating. Throughout their marriage, Victoria had wanted children desperately. She'd brought it up gently at first, then more urgently as the years passed. But Marcus had always deflected, delayed, found another reason why not yet made sense. His career was demanding. They needed financial stability. The world was too uncertain. He'd had 1,000 excuses, each one a brick in the wall he'd built between them, never admitting the truth even to himself, that he was terrified of becoming like his own father, who'd abandoned him and his mother when Marcus was 5 years old. "Shall we begin?" Victoria's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, gestured toward the empty chairs. Victoria lowered herself carefully into the seat across from Marcus, and he watched every movement, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. She met his eyes briefly, and he saw something there, not defiance, not smugness, but a quiet sadness that made him feel even worse. The meeting proceeded in a fog. Patricia outlined the settlement terms they'd agreed upon months ago. The house would be sold, proceeds split evenly, retirement accounts divided. Personal property had already been separated. Everything was straightforward, civilized, painfully adult. Marcus signed where his lawyer indicated, his hand moving on autopilot while his mind spun in circles. Who was he? The father. Who was the man who'd succeeded where Marcus had failed? Had Victoria fallen in love? Was she happy? Did this man know how lucky he was? "There's one additional matter," Patricia said, sliding another document across the table. "Victoria would like to request that the house sale be expedited. She's hoping to have the proceeds within 60 days if possible." Marcus's lawyer frowned. "That's quite aggressive given the current market. May I ask why the urgency?" Victoria's hands folded over her belly, protective and tender. "Medical expenses," she said simply. "I need to make sure I have adequate funds set aside." Something in her voice, a vulnerability, a hint of worry, cut through Marcus's shock. He looked at her, really looked at her, and noticed what he'd missed in his initial devastation, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself, not just with the careful posture of pregnancy, but with a guardedness that suggested pain. The medical bills document on top of her folder. "Is everything okay?" The words escaped before he could stop them. "With the pregnancy?" Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, and he saw fear flash across her face before she composed herself. "It's complicated. But we're managing. She said we. The father was involved then, supporting her. That should have been a comfort, but it only twisted the knife deeper. The meeting concluded 20 minutes later. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, timelines were established. Marcus moved through it mechanically. But as Victoria stood to leave, he found himself standing too. "Victoria, wait." She paused, turning slowly, one hand on the doorframe. Can I? He didn't know what he was asking. Can I know who he is? Can I understand how you moved on so easily? Can I turn back time and make different choices? Can I walk you out? She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. They rode the elevator in silence, the only sound her slightly labored breathing. Marcus noticed she pressed a hand to her lower back, wincing subtly. When they reached the lobby, instead of heading toward the exit, he gestured to a quiet seating area by the windows. Please, just 5 minutes. She hesitated, then agreed, lowering herself carefully onto the cushioned bench. Marcus sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, his mind churning with everything he wanted to say and couldn't. You look good, he finally managed. Pregnancy suits you. Victoria smiled sadly. You don't have to do this, Marcus. Make small talk. We're past that. I know, He ran his hands through his hair. That old gesture of frustration and helplessness. Seeing you like this, it made everything real in a way it hasn't been. You mean seeing that I moved on? No, yes, I don't know. He turned to face her fully. Victoria, I was wrong. About everything. About kids, about us, about what mattered. I was so focused on my fears that I couldn't see what I was losing until it was gone. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her right finger. Not a wedding band, just a simple silver circle. Some realizations come too late. I know, his voice cracked. And I'm genuinely happy for you. I am. That you found someone who could give you what you wanted, what you deserved. I need you to know that letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Before she could continue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted to worry. I have to take this. It's my doctor, she answered. And Marcus watched her face transform through a spectrum of emotions. Concern, fear, then visible relief. Thank you? Yes, I'll be there. Thursday at 2. Thank you so much. When she hung up, she was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face even as she smiled. They found a match. For the bone marrow, they found a match. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. Bone marrow? And then Victoria told him everything. There was no other man. There had never been anyone else. The baby was his, conceived during one brief night 9 months ago when she'd returned to the house to collect some belongings. He'd been there unexpectedly. They'd talked for hours, reminded each other of who they'd once been together. One thing had led to another, but in the morning, Victoria had left before he woke, convinced it had been a mistake to blur the lines when they were trying to move forward. When she'd discovered the pregnancy, she'd also discovered the baby had a genetic condition, requiring bone marrow, treatment soon after birth. The medical bills were staggering. She hadn't told Marcus because she genuinely believed he wouldn't want to know, that he'd feel trapped, that she'd be forcing on him the very thing he'd always feared. I was going to tell you after, she whispered. After the divorce was final. I wasn't trying to trap you or obligate you. I just needed to get through this on my own first. Marcus couldn't speak. His vision blurred with tears. His child, their child. And she'd been carrying this burden, this fear, this responsibility, alone for months because he'd spent years convincing her he didn't want this. Test me, he said hoarsely. For the bone marrow match. Test me right now. Marcus, you don't have to. Victoria. He took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin, the realness of this moment. I've made so many mistakes. I've been so afraid of being my father that I became something worse, someone who was present but absent, who made you carry everything alone. But I'm here now, and that's my child. Our child, please let me do this. Let me be there. She searched his face, and he let her see everything, the regret, the fear, the desperate hope, the love that had never actually died but had just been buried under layers of self-protection. Okay, she whispered finally. Over the following weeks, Marcus was tested and discovered he was a partial match. Not perfect, but viable. More importantly, he showed up to every doctor's appointment, every consultation, every moment of fear when Victoria woke at 3 a.m, convinced something was wrong. He canceled meetings, rearranged his life, and proved through action what words never could. They didn't sign the divorce papers. Instead, they started counseling together, unpacking years of miscommunication and fear. Marcus confronted the trauma of his father's abandonment, finally understanding that being afraid of repetition had caused him to create a different kind of absence. When their daughter Emma was born in March, tiny and perfect and fighting, Marcus held Victoria's hand through every moment. And when Emma received her bone marrow treatment from the donor they'd found, supplemented by Marcus's own stem cells in a secondary procedure, he understood what he'd been running from all those years. Not the fear of responsibility, but the terrifying, overwhelming enormity of love. 6 months later, with Emma thriving and Victoria's smile reaching her eyes again, Marcus stood in their kitchen, not the old house they'd sold, but a new home they'd chosen together. He watched Victoria sing softly to Emma, her voice carrying the melody of a lullaby his own mother had once sung to him. Some things break beyond repair, but some things, if you're willing to do the hard work, if you're brave enough to face your fears and humble enough to ask for another chance, can be rebuilt into something even stronger than before. The divorce papers sat in a drawer somewhere, unsigned and irrelevant. In their place was something infinitely more valuable, a family, imperfect and hard-won, built on honesty, vulnerability, and the radical act of showing up even when you're terrified. Marcus had frozen when he realized Victoria was pregnant. But in that moment of shock, something had thawed in him too, the capacity for courage, for growth, for becoming the person his family needed him to be. And that, he finally understood, was what love actually required.